She didn't flinch when they called her name. Not at first. She just looked up slowly from the window, the clouds below the plane catching the morning light like something out of a painting, and turned to face the two uniformed officers standing in the aisle of first class. Both of them broad-shouldered. Both of them certain. Both of them looking at her like she had already done something wrong. "Ma'am," the taller one said, his voice low but carrying. "We're going to need you to come with us." The cabin went still. Not quiet, because the hum of the engines kept going, the recycled air kept blowing, a baby 2 rows back in economy kept making soft little noises. But the people went still. 47 passengers in that first class and business section, and not one of them moved. Not one of them spoke. She looked at them, at the officer, then at the flight attendant hovering just behind him, eyes fixed somewhere above her head, and she felt it. That familiar tightening in the chest. That slow, controlled burn that she'd spent 23 years learning how to swallow. On what grounds, she asked. Calm. Measured. The voice of a woman who'd sat across from hostile board members and watched them blink first. A passenger reported a concern, "Ma'am. We just need to sort it out off the plane." A passenger reported a concern. She almost laughed. Instead, she reached down slowly, picked up her carry-on bag, and stood. Because she knew something they didn't. She knew exactly what was in that bag. And she knew that within the hour, every person on this plane was going to understand what they had just witnessed. But first, they were going to make it so much worse. Victoria Langston did not grow up thinking she would own an airline. She grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in South Baltimore, on a street where the streetlights flickered half the night and the corner store was the only place open past 9. Her mother worked double shifts at a hospital laundry facility. Her father had left when Victoria was 4, not dramatically, not with a fight, just quietly gone one Tuesday morning like a coat that had walked itself out the door. What Victoria had was a mother who said, "You will not be limited by this street," every single morning while braiding her hair before school. And she had a notebook, a battered red spiral notebook where she wrote down every business idea she had from the age of 9 onward. By the time she was 12, she had 47 of them. By the time she graduated top of her class from Howard University's School of Business at 22, she had narrowed it to 1. Logistics. Transportation. The invisible backbone of the world's economy that nobody talked about until something broke. She started her first company with $11,000, 9 of which were borrowed from her mother's retirement account, a fact that kept her awake more nights than she could count. A small freight brokerage, operating out of a rented desk in a shared office space in downtown D.C. She made calls from 7 in the morning until 10 at night. She drove to meetings in a 2003 Honda Civic with a crack across the windshield and a heating system that gave out every January. In the first year, she nearly closed 4 times. She didn't close. By year 3, she had 12 clients and 3 employees. By year 7, she had her first acquisition, a mid-sized trucking company whose owner had underestimated her twice in the same negotiation meeting, both times to his lasting regret. By year 15, Langston Logistics had revenues north of $400 million. She had been on the cover of Black Enterprise twice, featured in Forbes, and invited to speak at a World Economic Forum panel where she was the only black woman and the youngest person in the room by 11 years. She had also been passed over for a board seat at a major freight company, 3 times, been told her leadership style needed softening by men who screamed at assistants, and had a joint venture pulled from under her 48 hours before signing because a partner went in a different direction, a direction that turned out to be a white-owned firm with half her operational capacity. She knew what the world was. She had never let the world win. And now, at 46, she was 2 hours from the biggest moment of her professional life, the closing meeting that would make her the majority owner of Meridian Airways, a mid-size regional carrier with routes across 14 states and ambitions to expand internationally. She hadn't told anyone. No press. No announcement. Just her attorney on standby by phone, and the signed acquisition agreement in the leather portfolio inside her carry-on bag. She had booked first class. She had earned first class. She had sat down in seat 2A like it belonged to her, because it did. But that was before the flight attendant's eyes lingered a second too long that it happened at boarding. Victoria had arrived at the gate early, the way she always did. She believed in early the way some people believed in luck, as something you manufactured through discipline. She had her boarding pass ready, her bag neatly packed, her phone on silent. The gate agent scanned her pass, saw the seat assignment, and there was a flicker, barely a tenth of a second, before the professional smile returned. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Langston." She walked the jetway, turned left into the aircraft, and found her seat. She stowed her bag. She settled in. She ordered water when the pre-departure service came around, declined the champagne, and pulled out the documents she wanted to review before landing. The flight attendant, a woman named Karen, according to her name tag, somewhere in her 50s with silver hair pulled back tight, paused when she reached Victoria's row. "Can I get you anything else?" she asked. Nothing wrong with the words. It was the pause before them. The way her eyes had moved to the seat number. Then to Victoria. Then back to the seat number. Like she was doing math that didn't add up. Victoria had met that look 1,000 times in 1,000 different rooms. She smiled pleasantly. "I'm fine, thank you." Karen moved on. Victoria returned to her documents. 40 minutes later, 20 minutes after wheels up, she became aware of a subtle shift in the cabin. A male passenger 2 rows back, first class, had been turned in his seat, speaking quietly to Karen, who was leaning down to listen with that particular angle of concern that frontline workers adopt when someone tells them something they feel they must act on. The man was somewhere in his 60s. White. Blue blazer. The kind of easy authority that came from never having been questioned. He glanced at Victoria as he spoke. She looked away. Returned to her papers. Felt her jaw tighten by 2 degrees. "Don't react," she told herself. "You are 2 hours from the biggest deal of your career. Do not react." But what she didn't know, couldn't see from her seat, was that Karen had already made a call to the cockpit. And the cockpit had called ahead to the airport. And the airport had sent 2 officers to meet the plane at the gate. Because a passenger had reported a concern. The concern, it would later emerge, was this: the man in the blue blazer had told Karen he didn't feel comfortable with a passenger in first class who was acting strangely. Victoria had been reading documents and drinking water. That was the strange behavior. Nobody knew it yet, but this flight was about to make national news. The plane landed at 10:47 a.m. Victoria had her seatbelt off before the fasten seatbelt sign clicked out. She was reaching for her carry-on when she saw them in the jetway, the 2 officers, waiting before the bridge even finished docking. Something cold moved through her. Not fear. She had moved past fear years ago. It was something older and more tired, recognition. The door opened. The flight attendant came back first, walking toward her with that look again, the one that wouldn't meet her eyes directly. And then the officers stepped onto the plane. "Victoria Langston," the taller one said. Every head in the cabin turned. "Yes," she said quietly. "Ma'am, we've received a report of a concern regarding your behavior on this flight. We're going to need you to come with us. I'd like to know the nature of the report. We can discuss that off the plane. I'd like to discuss it here." There was a pause. The officer's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted, an impatience that he was controlling with professional effort. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to please come with us now." And then, in a moment that 3 passengers caught on their phones, he reached out and took her by the arm. Not roughly. Not with malice, perhaps. But firmly. The grip of an assumption. The grip that said, "You will comply because I am certain of what you are." Victoria went still for one breath. Then she stood, her carry-on in her free hand, her back straight, her face composed in the particular expression of dignity that she had inherited from her mother and perfected in 2 decades of boardrooms. She walked off that plane on her own feet. But the grip didn't leave her arm until she was 10 feet down the jetway. Behind her, the man in the blue blazer was already standing, already reaching for his own overhead bag, already moving with the ease of someone who had done the right thing and knew it. He didn't look at her as she was led away. He never once looked at her. They took her to a small security room off the main terminal, gray walls, fluorescent lights, a table with 2 chairs and a plastic bottle of water nobody had offered her. The 2 officers, she would later learn their names were Hendricks and Pryor, sat across from her. A third man, in a Meridian Airways operations vest, stood near the door like he wasn't sure whether to be here or not. "Ms. Langston," Officer Hendricks began. "We appreciate your cooperation." "I haven't cooperated," she said. "I've complied. There's a difference." He paused. "The report we received indicated that a passenger had concerns about your behavior during the flight." "What behavior specifically?" "The passenger indicated that you were." "What behavior, officer?" Another pause. Pryor, the shorter one, shifted in his seat. "Appearing agitated. Speaking on your phone in a way that made a fellow passenger feel unsafe." Victoria looked at him for a long moment. "I made one phone call," she said. "To my attorney. Before takeoff. While we were still at the gate. I spoke for approximately 4 minutes. I then turned my phone to airplane mode and spent the remainder of the flight reading legal documents." The passenger felt. What the passenger felt, Victoria said, and her voice was still quiet, still controlled, but something in it had shifted, a precision, a clarity that filled the small room like a change in air pressure, was uncomfortable. "About me. In that seat. And what you are telling me, without saying it directly, is that you removed me from a commercial aircraft and brought me to this room because a man in a blue blazer felt uncomfortable that a black woman was sitting in first class reading papers." Nobody spoke. The man in the operations vest looked at the floor. "I want to see the incident report," she said. "I want the name of the reporting passenger. And I want the name of the flight attendant who initiated the call." Hendricks cleared his throat. "Ms. Langston, we're just following." That was when her phone rang. She had it face up on the table between them. She looked down at the screen. The caller ID read, Gerald Whitmore, Meridian Airways CEO. She looked up at Officer Hendricks. "I need to take this call," she said. "And when I'm done, I think we're going to have a very different conversation." She answered on the second ring. "Gerald." "Victoria." His voice was warm but tight, the voice of a man who'd just been told something alarming. "I just got a call from our operations team. They're telling me you were removed from one of our aircraft at Gate 14. "That's correct." "My God." A pause. "Are you all right?" "I'm in a security room with 2 officers and one of your operations staff." A long silence on his end. Then, very quietly, "Victoria, do they know who you are?" She looked at Hendricks. At Pryor. At the man in the operations vest, who had looked up from the floor and was now watching her with an expression that was shifting, rapidly, from boredom to alarm. "I don't believe they do," she said. "Put me on speaker." She set the phone on the table and pressed the button. "This is Gerald Whitmore," said the voice through the speaker. "I am the current Chief Executive Officer of Meridian Airways. I need to know, immediately, who is in that room." Hendricks leaned forward slightly. "Sir, this is Officer Hendricks, Airport Security, N. I need your full names and badge numbers, please. All of you." The room changed. It was subtle but total, the way a room changes when everyone in it simultaneously understands they have made an error they cannot unmake. "Gerald," Victoria said, I also need you to tell them what's in my carry-on bag. Another pause. And then Gerald Whitmore, CEO of Meridian Airways, said 4 sentences that made the color drain from every face in that room. In Ms. Langston's carry-on bag, Gerald said, you will find a leather portfolio. Inside that portfolio is a signed acquisition agreement, signed by me, signed by the board, and signed by Ms. Langston, dated 3 days ago. That agreement makes Victoria Langston the majority owner of Meridian Airways, effective upon the completion of closing procedures scheduled for today at noon. The fluorescent lights hummed. Officer Pryor made a sound that wasn't quite a word. Ms. Langston, Gerald continued, is not merely a passenger on one of our aircraft. She is Meridian Airways. As of the close of business today, she is my employer. She is the employer of every person in that room. She is the employer of the flight attendant who made the report, the ground operations staff who called security, and, by extension, the security contractors who serve this terminal. Victoria reached into her carry-on bag. She set the leather portfolio on the table. She opened it. The acquisition agreement was on top, 47 pages, thick with legal language and bearing, on the final page, 3 signatures. One of them was Gerald Whitmore's. One was the signature of Meridian's board chairman. And the third, in precise, unhurried cursive, was Victoria Langston's. Below the agreement, visible at the edge, was a board-level security clearance badge, the kind issued only to C-suite executives and ownership, with her photograph, her name, and the Meridian Airways logo pressed into its laminate face. Officer Hendricks stared at it for a long moment. Then he looked up at Victoria. And she saw it happen, saw the understanding arrive, saw it move through him like something he couldn't stop, the full, devastating weight of what had just occurred in this small gray room and on that plane. Ms. Langston, he said. I don't, she said, softly. Not yet. She picked up the phone and took Gerald off speaker. I'll be at the closing at noon, she told him. We'll talk about the rest later. She ended the call. She stood. She picked up the portfolio and put it back in her bag. And then she looked at every person in that room, slowly, deliberately, one at a time, and said, I'd like to leave now. Nobody moved to stop her. She didn't go straight to the closing. She went to the airport Marriott, 2 terminals over. She took an elevator to the 4th floor, walked to room 412, which she had booked as a precaution, sat on the edge of the bed, and let herself have 7 minutes. 7 minutes where she didn't have to be composed. Where she didn't have to be measured. Where she could let her hands shake and her jaw unlock and feel what it meant to have been grabbed by the arm in front of 47 silent witnesses and walked off a plane you were about to own. Then she washed her face. Fixed her jacket. Called her attorney, Diane Chen, who had been waiting by her phone for exactly this kind of emergency for 23 years, and gave her the short version. Diane was silent for 4 seconds. Are you hurt? No. Do you want to pursue this? Victoria looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. At the eyes that had seen a lot of rooms and outlasted a lot of men who'd underestimated her. At the jaw that her mother had given her along with those morning affirmations on a South Baltimore street. I want to close my deal first, she said. Then yes. I want to pursue this. I'll start drafting. She hung up and called a car. What she didn't know yet was that 3 of those 47 passengers had already posted videos. And by the time her car reached the building where the closing was scheduled, those videos had 40,000 views. And climbing, the Meridian Airways closing happened in a glass-walled conference room on the 22nd floor of a downtown building. 8 people around the table, lawyers, board members, a notary, Gerald Whitmore himself. When Victoria walked in at 11:54 a.m., 6 minutes early, there was a collective exhale around the table that had nothing to do with professionalism. Gerald stood. Victoria. He crossed the room and took her hand in both of his, a gesture that was neither performative nor political. Just a man who understood what had happened and didn't know another way to say it. "I'm sorry." "Close the deal," she said. "We'll handle the rest." They sat. The documents were reviewed, then signed. The notary stamped. Hands were shaken. Photographs were taken, not for press, just for record. At 12:37 p.m., Victoria Langston became the majority owner of Meridian Airways. She excused herself to the restroom, stood over the sink for a moment, gripped the edge of the counter, and breathed. 23 years. A cracked windshield Honda. Her mother's retirement account. 47 pages of signed agreement and a board-level badge and a man in a blue blazer who had looked at her and seen something that needed to be reported. She straightened. Dried her hands. Went back into the conference room where people were still congratulating each other. Outside, the videos had 200,000 views. The name Meridian Airways was trending on X. Her name was trending right behind it. The call from Meridian's communications director came at 2:15 p.m. "Ms. Langston, Victoria, we're getting media inquiries. Dozens of them. The videos are everywhere. We need to know how you'd like to. What's Meridian's current public statement?" "We haven't issued one yet." "Good. Don't issue anything without me." She sat with Diane Chen and Gerald Whitmore in Gerald's soon-to-be former office and they talked for 40 minutes. Victoria's position was precise and calm and absolute. First, she wanted a full, unambiguous apology from Meridian Airways as an institution, not a statement about taking the matter seriously, not "we are committed to reviewing our procedures." A direct apology. Her name. What happened? That it was wrong. Second, she wanted the reporting passenger identified in the incident record. She would not be pressing charges against him, not yet, but she wanted the record accurate. She wanted it documented that his concern had resulted in the physical removal of the airline's incoming owner from a first-class seat. Third, the flight attendant, Karen, would undergo mandatory bias training. She would not be terminated. Victoria was specific about this. "I'm not interested in destroying someone's livelihood," she said. "I'm interested in changing behavior." Fourth, Meridian Airways would fund, in full, a new internal initiative, a diversity and inclusion oversight board, with actual authority and an actual budget, not a committee that met twice a year and produced a PDF. Gerald listened to all of it. Then he said, "Is there anything you want personally?" She thought about the grip on her arm. About the fluorescent lights in that gray room. About 47 silent passengers and a man in a blue blazer who had never once looked at her. "I want the security camera footage from the jetway," she said. "And the incident report. Unredacted." Diane made a note. The statement went out at 4 p.m. It used the word wrong 3 times. It used her name. It did not hedge. By 6 p.m., it had been shared over 1 million times. The man in the blue blazer was named Douglas Harrett. He was, the internet discovered within 12 hours, a retired marketing executive with a public LinkedIn profile and a modest social media presence. By the next morning, that presence was overwhelmed. He issued his own statement, brief, defensive, the language of a man who believed he had done something reasonable and was baffled by the response. The statement was not well received. Karen, the flight attendant, did not speak publicly. Sources inside the airline said she had been shaken by the footage, by seeing herself from the outside, by what the camera had captured in her expression as she'd stood behind the officers. She completed the training. She asked, through a union representative, if she could write a letter to Victoria Langston privately. Victoria said yes. The letter arrived 3 weeks later. Victoria read it once, filed it away, and said nothing about its contents publicly. Some things, she believed, belonged between people. Officer Hendricks and Officer Pryor were contracted through a third-party security firm. The firm launched an internal review. The review found procedural deficiencies in the escalation process. Both officers kept their jobs, though their supervisor did not. The video, specifically the 37-second clip of Victoria being led up the jetway, carry-on in hand, head up, face composed, circulated for weeks. It was shown on morning programs and evening panels. It became the centerpiece of a congressional subcommittee discussion on aviation passenger rights. The congresswoman leading the discussion opened her remarks by saying, she was carrying the deed to the building while they argued about her right to be in the room. Victoria gave one interview. A single one, to a journalist she'd trusted for years, 2 months after the closing. She sat in her new office, in a building that now bore her name on the floor directory, and she was asked what she wanted people to take away from what had happened. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I want them to understand that what happened to me wasn't unusual. The only unusual part was what was in my bag. And I've been thinking about that a lot, about all the people it happens to who don't have a signed acquisition agreement to pull out. Who don't have a CEO on speed dial. Who get walked off that jetway and into that gray room and nobody ever hears about it. Those are the people I keep thinking about." She paused. The badge saved me that day. But it shouldn't have needed to.